first time I got involved in rugby was when I was 5. One of my mates came over to my house at the time when I lived down in Bracknell and said, "Do you want to come up to the local rugby club, which was Bracknell Minis, and have a game of rugby?" I didn't know what it was at the time, and just been playing it ever since. I stayed in. He left there. He stopped playing that summer when he turned 6, and I've been playing ever since.
A little bit louder. There we go. I think that's more like it. So, at that young age, was it apparent straight away to you that maybe you had a bit of a gift for the game and that it was something that you were going to be good at?
I was certainly at that age, at mini level, I was a lot bigger than most of the kids, and that had its advantages, obviously. So I sort of stood out in that sense, and I was a centre. I scored a lot of tries, and I loved rugby. I loved tackling, I loved scoring, I loved everything about the game, and I continued enjoying it until I was sort of 18 at centre. And then I got moved to the back row, and it changed everything for me, really, because I wasn't quite making it. I didn't quite have what it took to make it as a centre, but I had the skills from being centre that translated into being a back rower, and it worked out all right for me.
So both at the point where you started playing the game and then when you moved positions, was that mainly about physiology more than it was about maybe ball handling skills and on-the-ball ability, do you think?
I'm not entirely sure. I mean, I played. I came to Leicester when I was 14, and I was trying out as centre, and I just didn't. I don't know what it was. I just didn't quite have that edge that I had as a back rower. The first time they played me, I went to the county trials as a centre, and I tried to get into the Midlands as a centre, and I missed out 2 seasons in a row. And the following season they moved me to the back row, and an absolute blinder, just running around, chasing the ball, being an oars, being in everyone's face, and it was brilliant because I had so much energy. I think it was probably wasted in the backs because there was you didn't get the ball as much, you didn't do as much. So some wise teacher, I think it was Brian Welford or Andy Wolstenholme, moved me up. They were both my school teachers at the time. So.
My next question was going to be if there was a coach back at that time who maybe pointed you in the right direction and maybe gave you the right tools to go on and become the player that you have. And obviously you just mentioned 2 names there. You obviously have a lot to thank them for in moving your positions.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, there was so many. I think you have to thank everyone that's ever been a part of your life, coaches and players, because they've all influenced you to some degree. Whether it's Oakham Town under-14s or Bracknell Minis or England or British Lions, everyone's influenced you. And I suppose if you look back, you say one of the most important things was moving me to back row, and Brian Welford and Andy Wolstenholme and the guys at school sort of made that transition, and it worked out pretty well for me.
So in those early days, was there a player as well maybe, or more than one player, who you looked upon as a player you'd like to be like when you grew up?
Well, weirdly, when I was a kid, obviously I came here. We moved up to Leicester when I was 10 and went to Oakham School. So from about the age of 10 or 11, I came down here. We sat in the stands chanting Dino and watching the Tigers play when they had Rory Underwood and Martin Johnson, Richard Cockrell, down Garforth, all those old heads playing, and I was sat here chanting Dino with everyone else, and it just sort of went on from there. Really, it was bizarre then to think at 18, just turning 18, that I'd then be playing and training with those guys that I've been watching for so long. I actually forgot what you asked me at the start of that question.
About players that you kind of looked upon as a kid and said, that's who I'd like to be like.
Yeah, so I think weirdly as a kid, because I was a centre for so long, Will Carling was always one of my childhood heroes. But I think when I came to Leicester and sitting in the stands watching the games, Dino was always like a hero, a local hero. He was such a legend, and then obviously got to know him as a player and as a coach, which was quite bizarre. But it's an interesting process.
He had an all-action style, you'd say, and wanted to be involved in everything. Is that kind of why you've become the kind of player you have? Is maybe playing flanker a lot to do with that as well, because you can go and follow the play as much as you can playing a flanker position? I think that's probably it. I have a lot of energy, and being a flanker, you just get around the park, whether it's being a nuisance in the fly half space or getting to kickers, kick-offs, chasing people, making tackles. It's just about work rate, and I suppose that's why it suited me. And obviously having the speed that I had from playing in the backs, and reasonable handling ability,
that it just all aided my transition into the back row. I wouldn't say I sort of have a style anywhere near Dean Richards, because he was a fairly, he was obviously quite dynamic from pick up at number 8, but he was never that dynamic around the pitch. He was quite sort of, his game was control, and once he had the ball, it was impossible to get it off him. He was like a giant of a man, and bear. Once he had it, that was it. Or if someone had it in a maul, he was going to get it off you. It was certainly a different style of play to me, but I think being here and being influenced by all those guys and just the mentality and the ethos that they have in the game was sort of rubbed off on me.
When did you realise that you might be able to achieve what you can now look back and say you have achieved in the game?
I actually think it was younger than that. I think I knew when I was about 15 or 16. It's not an arrogance, it's just I knew that I had the ability to play for England when I was about 15 or 16. And in my head, I always said to myself, yeah, you're going to play for England one day. I'm not going to go to Twickenham until I play for England. And that was the case. And I think you have to have that confidence as an athlete. You have to have a huge degree of confidence in your ability. There's certainly no need for arrogance. I've never been an arrogant person, but you have that belief in yourself that you can achieve things, and that's why you succeed, I think. And I think any athlete will tell you the same thing.
Does that make it more important, do you think, then, to succeed, to have that inner belief and to have that little extra something that people can't really put their finger on, because everybody takes the right diet, everybody trains in the right way?
Yeah, I've been at Leicester 13 seasons now, and I've seen a lot of people come and go. Obviously, I started out as a youngster, and now I'm sort of one of the more senior players. But you always see a transition year on year of players coming in and players going out, and players that are going to be the next best thing, and those that just don't make it. And there's probably 1 or 2 guys from each year group that come through as a youngster that actually make it, and sometimes less than that. So the attrition rate is huge, and all those guys that think, okay, I'm going to be a rugby player, it's going to be amazing, it's bloody hard work, and you get found out if you don't have that little bit extra about you. Sometimes you don't have to be the best player in the world, you've just got to be the most determined, and if you are, then it's going to stand out and people are going to want you involved. But it's a hard process, especially now. When I came in, we had 7 teams at Leicester, youth teams and Colts and 21s and academies. Now we have first team, the academy, and sometimes the second team, because barely any of the other teams have second teams now, just because they don't have the cash to field a big enough squad. So possibly 2 or 3 teams, which makes it extremely hard for guys to get in and compete for places. But they keep coming, and they're persistent, and if they put their minds to it and just knuckle down, then they will do it and they will succeed. But just because they don't always succeed at one club like Leicester doesn't mean that you're not going to get a break somewhere else. So I always worry that the guys coming through at that age, 15, 16, 17, 18, when they get dropped from Leicester, because obviously Leicester's such a huge club and has been so successful, I worry that those guys are going to maybe lose interest or be a bit disheartened. But there's no reason why, just because someone at Leicester didn't think you're good enough, that someone at another club isn't going to say, actually, you've got what it takes, or you might develop a bit later than others. I remember Ben Cohen, I played age group with Ben Cohen for about 18, 19, and he wasn't rated as one of the best players then, but all of a sudden, he turned 20 and he was playing for England. He had 50 caps, World Cup winner, played in the World Cup finals and all sorts of stuff. He became a great player for England, and sometimes people just develop later.